Gisela, are you there?
Thank you. Yes, I am. I shall start at 5 o'clock, right?
Yes, I think we can start. I'll just be letting people in the room, but yeah, we can start. Thank you.
Right, we have just gone 5 o'clock, and I'd like to thank you all for attending. This is such a relevant topic. I'm delighted to see so many attendees already while we are still letting people into the room. My name is Gisela Kaiser, and I shall be your Master of Ceremonies for this afternoon. I was asked to host this session as I'm the chairperson currently of the SAICE's Water Engineering Division. Kindly remember that you have to stay in the seminar for the entire duration to qualify for CPD points, but I'm sure that nobody would be tempted to leave given the interest of this topic. Firstly, I would like to thank our sponsors, that is RIBCCS. They have been providing software solutions to the construction and engineering industry for 4 decades. With thousands of users in more than 80 countries, it's no wonder that they are a firm favorite. In celebrating their 40th anniversary, they would like to share the joy today with one lucky winner. If we move to the next screen, there will be a code for you to scan, and you can enter our competition and stand a chance of winning a 1,000 Rands Take-A-Lot voucher. Scan the code and complete the form, and good luck. So I would now like to introduce to you the 2 experts on the topic of conventional and water-sensitive urban design within a greenfield township development. The first is Professor Adeshole Limbade. He holds a B Engineering degree in civil engineering from the University of Ilorin in Nigeria, a Master's in Engineering in Water Resources from the Federal University of Technology Akure in Nigeria, a PhD from WITS, a MAP from the WITS Business School. He is also a professional engineer registered with EXA, a member of SAICE, as well as a member of WISA. The Professor Adeshole is currently a professor at the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of the Witwatersrand, where he teaches infrastructure planning and water engineering subjects at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. His research interests are in the areas of water reuse, water demand, water conservation, as well as water supply. Adeshole has published extensively. He has more than 110 peer and non-peer reviewed manuscripts. He's received awards for research conducted and supervised and has led several multidisciplinary research and consulting teams. Welcome, Prof. Co-presenting with him is Akosua Budwa Ani, who holds a BSc degree in civil engineering from the University of KZN. She recently completed her master's degree in civil engineering at the University of the Witwatersrand, where her master's dissertation focused on water-sensitive urban design. Akosua is currently a senior engineer at ASEDA Consulting Engineers in Johannesburg, focusing mainly on the design and construction management of projects involving the provision of municipal services for both government and private sector developments. Before I hand over to the presenters, let me just remind you that we will have a Q&A session afterwards. If you could please make notes of your questions in the chat box as we move along. Akosua will be sharing her screen, and I trust you will enjoy the presentation and stay for the Q&A afterwards. Thank you very much. Akosua, over to you.
Thank you, Gisela, for the introduction, and thank you, SAICE, for the opportunity to present today. And thank you to the attendees for attending. Thanks for showing a lot of interest in this topic. I'll get right into it. A lot of us might be familiar with some of these images that came out of the Western Cape in 2018. South Africa is ranked as one of the 30 driest countries in the world. South Africa is a water-stressed country facing several challenges. Some of these challenges include the lack of accountability of those put in charge. It has been estimated that South Africa needs approximately R1 trillion to fix the broken water infrastructure. Year on year, the Auditor General reports millions of rands in irregular expenditure by many of our municipalities.
Akosia, please, you need to go to presenter mode. I'm currently seeing your PowerPoint in non-presenter mode.
Okay, let's try again.
Excellent.
Okay, so
yes,
all right.
you may then start again. Thank you.
All right, so I was taking you through the challenges that we're currently facing, the lack of accountability of those put in charge, the failing of existing infrastructure. Apparently 37 to 42% of potable water in South Africa is unaccounted for. Unsynchronized planning, the regional needs, in certain situations, the regional needs are sometimes not considered on the municipal and the local level when they're planning some of these infrastructure solutions. And the environmental challenges brought on by climate change. Those environmental challenges include drought. In conventional water distribution systems, water is taken from source, treated, transported, and distributed back to users. Wastewater is then collected, treated, and disposed into the environment. Conventional stormwater management systems limit groundwater infiltration and operation. These conventional systems have served us for many years, but at this point, there are some challenges that need to be improved upon. Greenfield developments within urbanizing areas present a unique opportunity to implement alternative approaches to conventional potable and stormwater management. An integrated systems-based approach that takes into account the available water resources, the different water users, sanitation, and stormwater issues can transform many of our urban areas from water wasteful to water sensitive. This integrated systems-based approach is termed water-sensitive urban design. Wsats, as it's publicly known, is loosely described as ensuring urban design is done in a water-sensitive manner, with the final goal being the holistic management of the urban water cycle. Wsats is also known in many parts of the world as low-income development, sustainable urban drainage systems, sustainable drainage systems, best management practices, and green infrastructure. I'm now going to take you through a few examples of Wsats systems. The first one being rainwater harvesting. Rainwater harvesting is the collection of runoff for temporary storage and use. In 2010, a study was conducted in a town called Claremont in the Western Cape, where 410 low-cost houses were built to be more reliant on municipal water. And one of the solutions that they implemented there was rainwater harvesting, meaning that they put a dual water system in those houses. So what happened was that the project was highly successful, and it's become a good example for many of our state entities to replicate. Permeable pavements allow runoff to infiltrate through the surface into underlying sublayers. Swales are the next example. Vegetative swales are grassland channel that conveys stormwater. In 2017, a study was conducted in Diepsloot. Diepsloot is a low-income settlement in Johannesburg. The project aimed at introducing SATs in the settlement to enhance the existing surface water quality and reduce the quantity of stormwater because they were facing a lot of flooding, localized flooding. The study was also highly successful and concluded that SAT implementation in informal settlements are viable if the community conditions are relatively stable and the community members are sufficiently incentivized. Infiltration trenches are also a perfect example, bioretention areas, green roofs, filter strips, sand filters, detention ponds, retention ponds, and constructed wetlands. The key benefits of WSATs include it reduces and delays stormwater runoff volumes, it enhances groundwater recharge, it reduces stormwater pollutants, it reduces the demand for treated municipal water supply, it limits the frequency of sewage overflow events, it allows for affordable food production locally, it improves air quality, and has so many social benefits, such as improved amenity. So the problem statement in this study was that are the benefits of applying WSAT method in a greenfield urban development likely to outweigh the benefits of the conventional design methods? The study compares the conventional design and the WSAT design of stormwater and potable water systems. This study was conducted in a greenfield township development in the south of Boksburg in the city of Ekurhuleni. The benefits of both designs were compared. The development is approximately 75 hectares large, and it was designed to accommodate 1,500 mixed-use urbans. So the site is currently undeveloped, and it just has felled grassland on it. So we developed a roadmap as to how we were going to answer this question. The first thing we needed to do was to identify the applicable conventional and then applicable WaterSATs solutions, following which we were to determine the pre and the post-development runoffs. The third task was to calculate the cost of the conventional and the cost of the WSATs infrastructure, following which we're then going to determine the potential savings and or losses from the implementation of both solutions. The conventional design included the determination of the stormwater runoff generated within the development and also nearby of the development on a sub-catchment level. It also included potable water to the township from the nearby municipal reservoir. The WSAT solution included all the conventional design solution as well as bioretention systems, detention storage, and rainwater harvesting. So as I said earlier on, the first task was to determine the pre and the post-development runoff. The first task was to determine the pre and post-water runoff. The second task was to model the pre-development runoff. P-System was employed for this task, and a simulation of the model was run. The development was then stimulated using design storms of various recurrence intervals. The targeted recurrence interval for the development on the local level was the 10-year design storm as required by the guidelines and also the local municipality. The results of the portable demand was that the development required 37 liters per second, of which the non-portable demand amounted to 13 liters per second. So prior to sizing of the rainwater harvesting tanks, it was vital that the non-portable demand is accurately determined. The use of the city's guidelines resulted in an annual average demand of 37.57 liters, and this corresponded to a peak flow of 76 liters per second. The non-potable water uses identified in this study included toilet flushing, irrigation, laundry. So to make the study easier to understand, 3 Wsats scenarios were modeled. This was to arrive at the best combination of SAT interventions to meet the output that we required. So basically what we needed to do was that we needed the post-development scenario to meet the pre-development conditions. Pre-development meaning before anything is put on the ground, the runoff generated, we need the post-development to match that runoff. So we implemented 3 scenarios. The first scenario was the implementation of rainwater harvesting. The rainwater harvesting, in this scenario, the peak runoff reduced from 73.58 cubic meters per second to 31.88 cubic meters per second. And this was a 26.85 reduction in runoff. So just by implementing rainwater harvesting, we were able to reduce the runoff by 26.85%. In the second scenario, in addition to rainwater harvesting, bioretention cells and vegetated swales were added to the treatment train. In this scenario, peak runoff reduced from 31.88 cubic meters per second to 30.7 cubic meters per second. And this was a 3.7% reduction. In the third scenario, a detention pond was added to the treatment train. So in addition to the rainwater harvesting, the vegetated soils and the bioretention cells, a detention pond was sized. The purpose of the detention pond was to slow down the flow of the speed of the runoff for it to match the pre-development condition. So in total, the runoff was reduced to 30.03 cubic meters per second in scenario 3, and this represented a 31.1% reduction. In other words, the runoff generated by the WSAT scenario is 30% less than the value of the post-development no control solution. This figure presents the outflow duration curves indicating an outflow drop to the pre-development conditions. So the red curve we see here is the conventional post-development scenario where no control was implemented. The green scenario represents the post-development scenario with rainwater harvesting. The gray is the post-development scenario with rainwater harvesting, bioretention, and vegetated swales. The blue represents the pre-development condition. So in this model, the magenta which represents the post-development rainwater harvesting, bioretention, vegetated soil, and detention pond, was able to match the pre-development condition. An outflow of 5.39 cubic meters per second from the pond met the pre-development runoff of 5.59 cubic meters per second. So we're just going back to the roadmap just to remind ourselves. We have identified the applicable conventional and WSAT solutions. We've determined the pre and post-development runoffs. The next task was then to calculate the cost of the conventional and the cost of the WSATs infrastructure. A bill of quantities was prepared and the capital cost calculated for each intervention. The conventional post-development infrastructure cost 81 million rand with an annual operation and maintenance cost of 563,715 rand 18 cents. This annuity sum over the project life cycle of 40 years at a minimal interest rate of 6.5. 6.5 was the JSE rate in 2019. This translated into a present value for O&M of 7.9 million. No, the capital cost with the O&M costs came up to 89 million rand. I beg your pardon. In scenario one was the inclusion of rainwater harvesting in the treatment train. The capital cost for that solution was 89.7 million rand, with an annual operation and maintenance cost of 1.1 million. This operational cost over 40 years life cycle came up to 16.8 million rand. The present value of the capital and operations and maintenance costs was 98.6 million rand. Scenario 2 was, in addition to rainwater harvesting, the inclusion of vegetated swales and bioretention. The capital cost increased to 89.9 million rand, with an annual maintenance cost of 1.7 million rand. The present value of the operation and maintenance cost was 24 million rand. The present value of the capital and O&M costs amounted to 114 million rand. Scenario 3, the post-development with rainwater harvesting, bioretention, vegetated soil, and the detention pond came up to 96 million rand with an annual operations and maintenance cost of 1.9 million rand. And the present value for O&M of 27.5 million rand. The present value of the capital and operations and maintenance costs resulted in 123.5 million rand. As we can see, the W's, as expected, actually, the Wsat scenario is significantly more expensive than the conventional costs. The next task now was to determine the potential savings and or losses from the implementation of the Wsats as against the conventional system. The cost associated with the implementation includes the initial capital cost, the operations and maintenance costs incurred while the project is operational. The benefits we identified included the savings in water tariffs due to the use of rainwater harvesting to augment the potable water demand, environmental benefits, and social benefits. Savings in water tariffs calculated indicated that it was going to cost the city about 700, the savings in water consumption was around 777,000 rand per year. And this resulted in a present value of 9.3 million rand. So over the life cycle of the project, this came up to a saving in water consumption of 131.9 million rand. It was outside the scope of the project to measure the environmental and social benefits in monetary terms of the project. As such, the benefits identified or the benefits to be used in the cost benefit calculation will only be the savings in water tariffs. The BCR is a ratio used to indicate the overall relationship between the project cost and its benefits. The benefit cost ratio greater than 1 indicates that the project is expected to deliver a net positive present value. This method is regularly used in analyzing and making decisions on development alternatives on projects. The cost benefit method was used in this project to evaluate the project cost and benefits. Based on the calculations we've just been through, the capital cost, operations and maintenance costs, together with the savings in water tariffs, we then went ahead and calculated the benefit cost ratio for the different scenarios. A benefit cost ratio of 1.07 was calculated for the entire project. That is in the scenario 3 example. So the WSAT scenario 1 and the WSAT scenario 2 resulted in also higher BCRs of 1.34 and 1.16 respectively. The implementation of WSATs within the new development allows for the reduction in stormwater runoff generation and a decrease in potable water demand. Although the costs of implementing the WSATs was significantly higher than the conventional design, the BCR indicates that over a project life cycle, the WSATs scenario is economically more desirable than the conventional design. And most importantly, this is a scenario where the social and the environmental benefits were not accounted for. So in conclusion, this conclusion was arrived at even without considering those, meaning that if those were to be considered, the benefits could be way more. Considering that South Africa is a water-stressed country and many countries around the globe have now gravitated more towards this approach to urban design, it is highly recommended that we start thinking and moving in that direction. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kusua. We're just waiting for our MC to join us. She's experiencing some technical difficulties. In the meantime, I just want to remind everyone that we have a competition that's running. I'm going to be sharing the PowerPoint slide with a QR code shortly, just so that you can scan it. And oh, our MC is here. The QR code will be shared before the Q&A session. Please don't forget to put your questions into the chat box.
My apologies. I was trying to get in again so that I could see the Q&A in the chat box, but I cannot see any questions. Mishka or the Prof, can you see the questions?
Yes, I can see the questions. Would you like me to articulate them to the...
I'm afraid I'm doing a terrible job as a MC, but if I don't have access to the chat box and the questions, I'm afraid I cannot really do much. So, Prof, if you could, you know, I know that you'll have to ask questions and then answer them. It does give you the freedom to focus on those that you find are most interesting, but I really would appreciate it.
Okay, I would proceed. Thanks. Thank you, MC. The first question was by Eric, and the question was the design signed off, I believe, by the municipal engineer? I think Eric is asking Akosia if the WSOD's design was signed off by the municipality for implementation at the study site. So that's the first question. And the second question seems was answered. The question was about what does WSOD stand for? And Eric was, who asked the first question, was very kind to respond to that question. And I believe Akosia did mention it during her presentation, that it's really loosely described as ensuring that our urban designs are done in a water-sensitive manner. In other words, ensuring that our conventional designs include consideration of our water resources, and that these designs are sensitive to the fact that our water resources are finite, and we need to consider these finite resources in a sensitive manner. Okay, Akosia, would you go ahead and answer the first question while I just look at the chat room for the other questions?
All right, thank you, Prof. So this project was designed in the conventional method, and it was signed off by the municipality, and they've gone ahead with the implementation of that. We then saw an opportunity in it to say to the municipality, if we had gone this approach, what were the outcomes going to be? So we then went on this approach on our own, and we came out with the solutions and the results. But the development as is now is going ahead with the conventional design. I hope that answers your question. So this WSATS design was done purely from a research point of view, and also to prove to our peers that these solutions actually could work. I hope that answers the question.
I believe it does. And just to add to that, Akosia is, as you would likely have noticed, is heavily involved in municipal design. A lot of our municipal guidelines are based on conventional designs. And while WSODS is a concept that has become very widely known, our observation is that many councils have not adopted WSODS as a progressive way of designing infrastructure. I noticed Kirsty Cadden is on the platform, so she would likely agree with me that only very few of our local councils or municipalities have included in their guidelines consideration of WSODS, and there is quite a drive in the water-sensitive urban design community to try and get our municipalities to embrace some of the concepts that we're presenting today. And I think that, this response answers what Gary asked. He says, WSOD has long been documented. Why so late on this? Gary, it's because a lot of our municipalities have not embraced water-sensitive urban design. So when Akosia and I engaged on a potential project for her research, this seemed like a very good project to engage upon, because she was one of the engineers involved in the conventional design that occurred at this greenfields community. So it made sense to get her to redesign or design additionally, but then include consideration for water sensitivity. Gisela, are you there? I think we've...
Yeah, hi, Prof. I am here. I'm afraid I still have no access to questions, but I was wondering if you can perhaps summarize for me a few of the high-level highlights that you felt were you got from the study.
Okay, I will respond, and I'm not sure if Akosia will also, but I think one of the concerns of local council has been that WSODS will result in increased capital expenditure. And for that reason, because many local councils are constrained in their budgets, introducing WSODS then becomes something nice to do, rather than something that we must promote within our communities when designing infrastructure. Well, one of the highlights that proceeded from this study is the fact that while capital expenditure, capital costs increased significantly as we added on WSOD infrastructure, What we then found, excuse me, I'm having thunder where I am. I hope you can hear me despite the thunder. So despite the increased capital expenditure, we also noticed the significant reduced operation and maintenance costs as a result of the savings in municipal potable water, especially due to rainwater harvesting. So increased capital costs, reduced operation and maintenance costs, which then resulted in a financially viable benefit to cost ratio. And what this means is that by introducing WSOD, councils may not make a significant savings financially, but there is likelihood that they will break even. In other words, the same costs expended on the project from a present value point of view could be the same cost that could happen if they introduced WSODs. And I think the added advantage is the fact that there are environmental benefits of WSODs due to reduced air pollution, a more aesthetic landscape within the community. We could use some of the infrastructure for recreational purposes within communities. So those are some benefits that one may not be able to financially cost, but do have significant benefits for our communities. Akosia, I don't know if you have further comments.
No, you've hit the nail right there. Yes, we can go on to the next one.
Prof, but if I can perhaps just come in again, thank you for that answer. I think it would probably feel quite intuitive to many of us that the life cycle costing makes a lot of sense. And apart from all the advantages that perhaps are a little bit harder to cost, certainly from a water resilience perspective, it is just the sensible thing to do. But further, just on the cost, were there any parameters that you couldn't employ in the financial analysis that you think perhaps in future projects you would want to?
May you please say that the last bit again, Gisela?
So I was asking, were there any parameters that were not employed in the financial analysis that you may want to include should you run such a project again?
I think due to the lack of, how do I put it, a lot of South African examples out there or available open source, it was difficult to identify some of the construction problems that might be run into. So we did this based on the conventional way in which we construct. That was the point of view from which we were pricing the bill. So for example, if there's been challenges with the seasonal planting of the bioretention cells, those were not, we couldn't get a real sense of some of those challenges. I don't know if I'm making sense, because in certain parts of the world, we could only plant certain landscaping that works in this area in this season, and it needs to be considered in the construction planning and stuff like that. So that was one of the biggest challenges in pricing the WSATS solutions. We couldn't really get a sense of, the experience was not really there. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think it is such a growing field, and coming from the municipal environment, I know that most municipalities are overburdened with so many things to take into account, but the more progressive municipalities will no doubt be doing this more and more, and I get going to figure out more and more. And I want to ask the Prof where he is, because I would love to be there. I'm sitting in Nelson Mandela Bay, where our dams are dropping rapidly down towards 17%, unlike the rest of the country, and we desperately need rain and thunder.
Well, I'm sitting in my office in Braamfontein, and I'm hoping that you can still hear me. It is raining quite a bit here. If I may just add to Akosia's response to the question about, I think the thunder is competing with me for audio on this platform. I think our councils need to recognize that the provision of infrastructure should not only be seen from a financial point of view. The implementation of WSODs must also, or the implementation of infrastructure must also consider the environmental and social benefit. One environmental benefit is that our conventional infrastructure for stormwater adopts a common enemy approach, which is collect all the stormwater, convey it into bulk stormwater infrastructure, and quickly get that water out of our urban areas, which then impacts on the water quality downstream. By introducing WSODs, we then slow down that process and in many instances reduce the peak flows that are going into the infrastructure. The second is that the capacity of the infrastructure with WSODs reduces, because then we don't need the sizes, especially for our conveyance infrastructure that we design conventionally. And so we're looking at the environmental benefits such as reduced pollution downstream, the quality of water that is being channeled to our downstream water sources of the environment is a better quality water. And like I said earlier, we could also build recreational facilities around the WSODs infrastructure that we're proposing. Isela?
Yes, thank you. I completely agree that clear environmental benefits to this. And my view is really that most municipal councils are not necessarily trying not to do the right thing. And when it comes to new development, I think it is just an absolute no-brainer to do this, despite the fact that the capital might be a little bit more expensive. It would be competing with, for example, on the operations and maintenance with other infrastructure. And I'm very aware just of the parlous state of infrastructure, especially water and sanitation infrastructure around the country, which then also would require capital costs to refurbish. So sadly, I think that in many areas we're still going to be a little bit away if the increase in cost is large. If the difference is not that significant, then it is so clearly from an operations and maintenance view the right thing to do that hopefully municipalities will see the light in that. And of course, it's generally easy to get capital funding than operations and maintenance funding unless you are ring-fenced utility service. So I'm very hopeful that this will really be the norm. I think it is far more attractive in terms of property prices and to engage investors in this regard. I cannot see the Q&A, so I'm not sure whether there are any other questions out there. Can somebody perhaps help me? I've been trying to connect with the logistics team, but I am having logistics problems. Unfortunately, not just thunder and lightning. Are there any more questions posted? Oh, and I see Mishka has her hand up. Perhaps Mishka can help me out.
Thanks, Jay. I just wanted to ask Prof. Adoshela if he can just let me know which was the last question that he attended to.
The next question will be from Graham, which is, how will this be balanced against municipalities wanting to increase their income from tariffs in order to cover their operating costs? So that will be the next question, Mishka.
Thank you very much, Prof. If I could ask our presenter to please attend to that question.
Okay. So as I said earlier on in the presentation, about 32 to 42% of potable water is unaccounted for. This is across South Africa. So either broken water, broken pipes, inaccurate metering. A lot of the households in our informal sectors are unmetered, and a whole lot of losses along the pipeline. So it's a catch-22, because the amount of water they're going to be, or the amount of money they're saving for not billing that is going to offset against the amount of money they need to spend on upgrading the pipe infrastructure anyway. So this is it's a big problem most of the municipalities are facing, unaccounted for water. And I think because the environmental and the social benefits were not considered, that's a study on its own. And once we are able to quantify that, we'll see that it will start to quickly outweigh the tariffs that they would have gained from charging for that water. I don't know if that answers that question. But I saw, as the questions were popping up, I saw, I don't know if it was a question or a statement from Chris Brooker. I'm happy to see that he's in the session. The first few lines or so did say something about reference to the City of Joburg's stormwater manual. Yes, that manual was fantastic. It was a lot of great help. The City of Johannesburg has done a lot of work in this area, trying to get standards out, and I have lost touch as to where they are in the process. I don't know if we could perhaps get some feedback on that, but I need to update myself as to where the City of Johannesburg. The last I saw it was a draft document, and I don't know if that 2019 document has been finalized and released as regulation yet. Thank you, Mishka.
Thank you, Akosua. If I can just come in here, I think you are very right that non-revenue water and water losses are so incredibly high, and of course the incremental cost of any additional water into the system is hugely high, and we need to start by losing less of our water. And if we can use water to recharge natural aquifers and so on, of course that would be the best way to do. Also, I think that with the move to seeing all water as a holistic, or the whole water cycle more holistically, and not just trying to get stormwater away from the roads and so forth, we really do have an opportunity to think about it differently and to perhaps start charging people in a different way. And something like a stormwater levy is certainly something that should be considered, because stormwater management is like a general good, yet it forms part of the resource cycle. And while you can't charge a tariff for it, to charge an for the permeable pavement instead of paved areas and so on may be a thing that we need to do in future, just to make sure that we can actually afford to fund this really important municipal service. I see Chris Brooker has a hand up. Chris? I am, however, not sure whether I can unmute anybody. Mishka, can you help?
Sorry, I'm just going to unmute him. Just a moment. Oh, you can just unmute Chris and speak. Let's try again. Okay, try now. Please unmute. Chris, are you there?
Oh,
You're
okay. All right. I've come back. I see it was grayed out, but now it is here. Yeah, just to thanks for letting me have something to say after I was so rude and joined very late. The City of Joburg Stormwater Manual was accepted by Council in November of 2019. So it is the regulation now that completes the requirement of the city's 2010 bylaws. And those bylaws are very clear. They require the latest and best technology to be used in the management of stormwater within the metropolitan area. So the application of Wsats to achieve the management objectives within the city is legally compulsory in terms of the bylaws. Well, that put a silence to everybody, didn't
it? No, thank you for that, Chris. I do appreciate it. Yeah, I don't know if the presenter wanted to comment on that.
No, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. It's an amazing document, very easy to follow, and it'll be great for the other or the other metros at least to follow suit. So the aim of this study was to show that we do understand the restrictions and the constraints in implementing this in already developed areas. But surely with greenfields, it's an opportunity for us to now start implementing these solutions. So I'm happy to hear that it's been accepted by council.
Wonderful. That is good news. And yeah, I think, in some cases one just has to take the incremental approach and start where you can start and show just the impact that it can have. Mishka, do you want to move on to the next question?
Doctor, I'd be lying if I said I'm sorry, I keep on moving between letting people in and the chat box. I'm not sure where we are with the questions at the moment. I think Prof. Adoshela, if you could just assist me, please.
All right. There've been quite a few chats on the platform. I do apologize. It's still thundering where I am, so hopefully you can all hear me. I'm just going to pull a question out of the hat, and it's from Njabulo. He says, how effective is this system in deep rural areas with scattered households and poor stormwater drainage systems? Akosia, I'm not sure if you heard that question. You want to give it a shot?
Yes, Prof. It's actually quite amazing. In the rural areas, you find that a lot of the households are already supplementing their water supply with rainwater harvesting. And it's across the majority of the Eastern Cape, for example, is on a hybrid of rainwater harvesting and municipal supply. Stormwater runoff is not really a big problem in those settings, But definitely the rural areas have been doing good with supplementing their potable water with rainwater. They've had their own reasons for doing so, intermittent supply and so on and so forth. But the municipal, a lot of the rural areas are doing quite well with the likes of rainwater harvesting, the use of rainwater harvesting.
Thank you, Akosia. Yes, I'm in full agreement. I think Wsats has become particularly relevant to developed communities because many of our rural communities have developed around nature, and they don't have the infrastructure that creates the dilemma for the water cycle. And therefore, Wsats comes in as attempting to mimic nature's response to storm water. Okay, the next question, Gisela, if I may, is from, I think it's Shanae Hopewell. It says, what was community response and buy-in like? And how is the maintenance handled? Is it conducted by the municipality? This could be detrimental to the system based on the performance of most municipalities when it comes to maintenance. I'm interested in the long-term performance and longevity of the system. Kosia?
Yes, so with this particular study, it has not been adopted yet because it's still a research or a project that was done on paper, for the lack of a better word. But in a lot of the estates or private developments around Johannesburg, for example, the managing agents have done a good job with managing those systems. So yes, as you said, the municipal management's or operations and maintenance culture is not always up to par, but in the private developments that these have been implemented, they've done a very good job with maintaining those systems because of the value they see in those systems.
Gisela? Thank you, Akosia.
Thank you. I'm afraid I'm still flying blind here, Prof. So if you can please choose another question off the list.
Okay.
Answer.
I am just scouring the chats. Okay, this is CPC Clay. Could Wsats be used to mitigate flooding in flooding-prone areas like Ladysmith in KwaZulu-Natal, for instance? Many of you would recall that Ladysmith was faced with severe flooding a few weeks ago, and tragically, a few people lost their lives, if I'm correct. I may be wrong there. It says, to put it into context, the town is struggling with an approximate 7-year flooding due to its proximity to the Klip River. So this is a question by basically, I think it's worth responding to, especially considering the recent events in Ladysmith.
Yes, basically, detention ponds and retention ponds, for example, are good at flood handling. So on the level of a town, yes, Wsats could be very beneficial in managing their flooding, but this is now subject to the availability of space to implement some of these solutions and the current problems that are causing these floods, if that makes sense. But yes, definitely Wsats has proven to be useful for mitigating floods.
Prof, I've managed to find a question. Let me just ask one. Well, this question was posted by Kabanga, and the question was, can Wsat be considered as a design alternative in a third world country with a tropical climate where capital funding is the major obstacle or challenge?
Can it be implemented in a third world setup where capital funding is a problem?
Yes, and with a tropical climate.
Prof.
Akosia, thank you. Yes, it can, and I must mention that tropical climates are climates that experience 8 to 10 months of rainfall. Wsats can be implemented especially in those environments, because that is where we need to attenuate peak flows from storms. Those are the environments where Wsats is particularly relevant because it's mimicking nature. And when I teach Introduction to Stormwater Management, I refer students to the fact that nature, before human development, was mitigating the storms that we are facing currently. And how did nature do it? It was that the water cycle efficiently functioned without human development. Now human development has come in. We've built pavements that restrict infiltration, increase runoff, increase evaporation, and so on and so forth. So it is what Wsats is attempting to do is to introduce or increase the presence of nature in the human developments that have become our communities. So yes, it can be, and it should be. Yes, capital is a particular concern for many of our third world or developing communities, but we must take a long-term, broader approach in our master planning. It is not just about capital expenditure. It is about life cycle costing. We must acknowledge that our capital expenditure, even though it is significant and it's usually demanded within the first few years or months of the infrastructure life cycle, it may be less than the total cost of that infrastructure over the lifespan of the infrastructure. So we must take a lifespan view of the infrastructure and ensure that we are also considering the operating and maintenance costs involved. If we do so, then we will be more considerate of the recurring costs of the infrastructure and less concerned about simply raising the capital to implement the infrastructure during the first few years of its existence. Gisela?
Thank you so much for that. I think from your answers, and also just from a first principle point of view, it is, dare I say it, a no-brainer to implement water-sensitive urban design in every environment, especially as floods and droughts become more extreme due to climate change. Interestingly, there's another question about implementation in remote rural areas, and what socioeconomic parameters from the CBA can this be implemented in rural areas, bearing in mind water quality management? This comes from Patrick Mattia. Did you catch that, or do I need to repeat the question? Well, you would have it on your Q&A as well. I'm not sure whereabouts in the Q&A it is.
Please repeat that, Gisela.
What are the potential risk parameters for WSAT implementation in remote rural areas? And what socioeconomic parameters from the CBA, I'm not sure what the CBA is, can this be implemented in rural areas, bearing in mind the water quality management?
It's difficult to, I'm not sure I fully understand the question. It's speaking about risk parameters and what one should consider in the cost-benefit analysis when looking at water quality. I do apologize. I'm a bit uncertain about the question.
Right. Unfortunately, I can't provide any more clarity. I just got a screenshot of some of the questions, but Prof, I'm afraid that's where the questions that I have end. Can you give me an indication? I know that you've been scrolling through the Q&A, but are there many more questions, and are there many that are perhaps not related to remote rural areas? Because that just seems to be where a lot of the questions have been. Are there perhaps some more diverse questions that we haven't yet covered that you would like to address? Just aspects that perhaps you would have liked to elaborate on or added onto after the slides.
Yeah. Yes, Gisela. There is this is not a question. This is a comment from Graham. And he says, for this work across the country, there need to be policy changes. Municipalities are only worried about capital costs. And this brings me to the comment that Chris Brooker made earlier about the recently approved City of Johannesburg policy. It would be interesting to know which other municipalities have Wsats as best practice in their stormwater management policies. I believe the City of Cape Town, but I don't know any others. Akosia, do you know of any others?
No, those are the two leading municipalities that I know of.
So we're looking at 2 out of, if I recall, there are probably about 250, 260 councils. Am I right or wrong now?
Yeah, there's something like 278, but 2 out of the 8 metropolitan municipalities, and it's also 2 of the larger ones. So in terms of covering of urban population, we're doing better there than in the entire country spread. But I think I would just like to challenge to a degree that question to say that councils only care about the capital cost. It is just unfortunate that there is such pressure on doing everything that is constitutionally required with the revenue that a municipality can recover. And COVID has certainly impacted all of us, but it has also impacted on the balance sheets and the income of municipalities. And in my experience, there are so many staff members who think far broader than just a straight financial cost when making recommendations in terms of projects. But if we look at inequality and the parlor state of our services, there is just such pressure on it. So I think it's going to take not only the clients, but it's going to take the consultants as well to really make a compelling case and to use examples of floods and droughts and loss of life, and also loss of economic growth, and which clearly threatens the financial sustainability and viability of our municipalities as well. So it's not always that people are single-mindedly concerned with cost of a solution. It is just incredibly difficult to have only 1 penny and have to spend that or turn it over 10 times because there are so many competing options in it. I believe from Mishka that the questions that are fielded were the last in the text box. So Prof, are there some other questions that you would like to elaborate on?
None that I can see that we have not covered in one way or another. And thank you for just clarifying the issue of competing financial interests in local councils. I empathize with decision makers who really want to make a difference in our local councils. It's an uphill task to make the right decisions when there's so many competing infrastructure issues. If it's not service delivery, it's no infrastructure at all. It's the salary bill is 70 to 90% of council budgets and so on and so forth. So thank you. I can't see any other questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. And I want to thank both our speakers for their resilience in the fact that I had to ask you to field your own questions. I see that Mishka has a hand. Mishka?
Thanks, Doctor. I'd just like to put the QR code once again on the screen so that our attendees can scan the code into their phone and enter the competition that's been sponsored by RIB-CCS. So I'll put that up in a minute, but please continue.
Thank you, yes. I think that I'm really heartened. I think that we peaked at 269 attendees. We're down to 236, so there's 236 people who would be able to qualify for their CPD points. I believe that those will be calculated now that we have the presentation available, and I'm sure all the attendees would be notified of those in the coming days. Here again is the QR code from our sponsors. Please do scan and enter and stand in line to win the R1,000 voucher from Takealot, which I think everybody can do with in these tough economic times. But yes, just to get back to thanking our speakers, thank you very much for not only for your time in preparing to do this and also your time in spending with us this afternoon, but I think to be innovating in such an exciting field and such a field with such good potential for growth in the future, it just makes perfect sense for this to grow from strength to strength. So thank you for spending time in researching this and piloting it and driving it and absolutely sharing your knowledge with us in this. I see I have a hand up again, but I can't quite see who it is. I think it might be Mishka. Somebody on the panel that has a hand up? Okay.
Sorry, Doctor, that was an old hand.
Okay, it was an old hand. I suddenly saw 2 hands. Okay, and I again apologize for the lack of streamlined Microsoft Teams interface that I certainly experienced. But thank you very much to everybody who attended and to our speakers. It was thoroughly enjoyable, and I'm sure everybody learned a lot. So with that, I would like to close this seminar. Thank you very much.